Carolyn Bryant, the witch that was responsible for the brutal murder of Emmett Till, has died.
And the great news is Carolyn Bryant, the she-devil that lied on Emmett Till long time ago, she has recently went to meet Satan.
Carolyn Bryant lived as an animal and died as a criminal. But she wasn't alone, not by a long shot. The two white men who were principally responsible for torturing, mutilating, and murdering a child, then dumping his body in the river, were put on trial. But naturally, they were acquitted by their fellow white supremacists. Because the murder of Emmett Till had absolutely nothing to do with defending Carolyn Donham's alleged honor.
Why is it that this young brother had to go through that? He was lied on. He came down to Monday, Mississippi. He was originally from Chicago. He was just visiting. He was in a store.
Look at what one lie did. It caused this boy his entire life. He will be eternally 14 years of age.
Emmett Till was kidnapped. He was tortured, mutilated, murdered, and then his body dumped in the river. Now, does anyone believe that it had been two black men who were accused of any one of those crimes, much less all of them? That those guys wouldn't have been dead by sundown?
Of course, we know that eventually the body was found. His mother decided to have an open casket, and a lot of that sparked a lot of the protests and a lot of the movements that came with the civil rights movement at the time.
Remember, Jack Johnson became the impetus for the Federal Mann Act, otherwise known as the white slavery law, simply because he had dated a white woman. As those of you who follow the black media know, the arrest warrant for Carolyn Donham was found last year. If the alleged issue was one of a statute of limitations, that could have been easily extended. All it took was some mere accusations against Bill Cosby, and you had states from California to New York changing their laws to extend and in many cases renew the amount of time to go after people for sexual assault and what have you. And it was always black ones who they seemed most interested in going after.
I think about all the suffering of black people after Emmett Till. You know, I think about people like Sandra Bland. I think about black people like Michael Brown. You know, that Tamir Rice, you know, that he was a young boy just like Emmett Till was. You know, I think about, Corin Gaines. I think about so many different black people who have suffered at the hands of these people, and they get to live their life.
Always said that Carolyn Bryant was the OG Karen. Granted, there were other Karens before her, before Karen was Karen, but she's one of the more famous ones. And when you think about how all these white women act, especially when it comes to black men right now, it always goes back to her. And I'm going to tell black men something right now, and y'all may or may not agree with what it is I'm about to say. You want to know why a lot of black women and even some other black men will criticize you if you end up dating a white woman? Look to this case right here. And Emmett Till wasn't even dating her.
Carolyn Bryant's not the last one. When you see a pattern of behavior across the board like this, consistent and defying any attempt to change or alter it, then you have to admit this is a policy at work. Everyone from the police to the prosecutors to the courts to the legislators to the white media, they all understand that there is an unspoken rule that if some white supremacist harms a black person, they are not to be punished. That's why, on the very rare occasion that it happens, it makes international news. You can't compare anyone else's minor grievances to the overwhelming oppression that we have to endure every single day. And when these hate criminals murder black people, they are protected by the white media and the government at all levels. The murder of Emmett Till was not just a Mississippi crime. It was a crime carried out by the United States.
The Carolyn Bryant is living today. With her spirit is in them today. They are just on AI with it. They put her spirit all on the apps. Her spirit is still roaming around today, just in modernized clothes. Nothing has changed. And I have came to that conclusion, at least for my personal self, because I know when I speak to the whole, a lot of you don't get it. But you have to learn to remove yourself from that evil.
A legacy of lying on black men to get them set up, hemmed up, and killed. So with that, I will say this. I feel absolutely nothing and forever about this woman. I don't know how the Till family, his relatives are feeling about this. Probably, if I was them, I'd probably be throwing a parade.
And now this demon is dead, which was the entire point. People have known exactly where it was at. This animal was simply allowed to live out its life without anyone attempting to seek justice. We've seen this across the board. There were tens of thousands of black people who were kidnapped and murdered in the period between Reconstruction and the late 60s. There are black people who to this day cannot go back to the cities that they were from because the white supremacists who controlled those places in the 50s and 60s are still in control today. In many cases, those white supremacists who were kidnapping and killing black activists, who were committing bombings and such, are still alive. Joe Biden was mentored by some of those racist segregationists. And Donald Trump, he considered a number of them to be good friends. These are people who he was on good terms with.
So when you see people like Carolyn Bryant die, it's a beautiful day for us. Now, some people say, well, you can talk about other things. I'm like, sure I can. And I do talk about other things. I got other channels, other subject matters that don't talk about this sort of stuff. But somebody got to talk about it. Somebody got to bring it up. And I know part of my lot in life is to lead my people out of Babylon into lands where they can be at peace. What's coming down the pipe and what's even starting to happen now, their comeuppance is happening. And I don't want my people being caught up in the mix. Don't have a love for Babylon unless you take on its judgments. Understand? Because one thing I know, even studying history, nothing lasts always. Their world is coming to an end.